Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Building Bridges Across the Laboratory Community webinar series. On behalf of ASCP, we'd like to welcome you all back to the Building Bridges webinar series in service of the CDC One Lab initiative. My name is Dr. Rodney Rohde, and I am chair of the Medical Laboratory Science program at Texas State University, as well as an associate director for the Translational Health Research Lab here at Texas State. And I've been very involved with ASCP over the last couple of years as a career ambassador and importantly as a workforce issues committee member. We want to start by encouraging everyone to check out our website where you can find out more about the free laboratory education and resources available through CDC One Lab and ASCP's One Lab grant. This webinar series highlights the diverse array of laboratory career paths and how exposure to formative experiences, often through collaborations and unique training opportunities, can shape these career trajectories. We'd like to acknowledge that this resource was made possible by funding from the CDC. However, ASCP is solely responsible for its content, and the viewpoints shared do not necessarily represent those of CDC. Today's sessions will feature 5 really fantastic laboratory educators. I can't wait to hear from them because I know how amazing they are, and they will make you all really excited about your plans. These experts will share a glimpse into their career paths and their laboratory outreach work in their communities, and then we'll have a Q&A session and conclude with some reminders. We'd like to quickly share a few housekeeping notes with you. Lines will be muted, so please add all your questions for the panelists into the Q&A box, and then I will relay questions at the end of the session. Closed captioning for this webinar is enabled for any interested parties. A link to today's recorded session and slides will be available on our website in 2 weeks. And so please make note of that. Before we get started, we wanted to share a quick overview of the career map template that our panelists will use to present today. I love these career maps. I have one myself, and it's been very useful in my own discussion with my colleagues. Education and work history will be presented on the left column, as you can see. Career influences will be presented in the middle column. And then finally, on the right column, you will see a career advice quote that really resonates with the panelist. So we're really excited to get started. We are first going to start with Lauren, and she's going to introduce herself and then share her career map. Welcome to the webinar, Lauren.
Hello, thank you for having me here. So my name is Lauren Schiefelbein. I am a medical laboratory scientist as well as an education coordinator for the University of Nebraska Medical Center's Medical Laboratory Science program. So what does it mean to be, an education coordinator? That's kind of a vague term for a job, right? So at the bottom of that career map, I teach the hands-on skills for our students. If many of you are MLSs or MLTs, you remember that portion where you had to come in and actually really use your hands before you had your clinical experience? That's the portion that I am deeply involved in. So making sure my laboratory is stocked. But of course, that's such a small portion of the year. So for the rest of the year, as an education coordinator, I am doing recruitment for medical laboratory science. So I'm going to the career fairs. I'm talking in high school courses. I'm talking in college courses to explain our profession, get our name out there, even for the students who aren't interested in it, letting them know it's still an important piece of healthcare, right? And I do a lot of coordinating with my students as well. I have my sort of traditional pathway, sort of in-person students. They have clinical sites at Nebraska Medicine that I help coordinate. And our program also has an online option for working MLTs to get their MLS. So I'm one of 2 people who help coordinate those MLTs through their online process. So how did I get here? Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a bioengineer. I saw a Discovery Channel documentary about the organ printer. Now, not much really seems to have come from that, but I was deeply interested in it. But I also wanted to go to art school. So my mom, who had gone to art school, said, no, you're going to college. So I went to college and I got a biology degree. I had to work full time through college. And at UNL, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, engineering courses were only offered in the evening and on a different campus, and I just couldn't quite swing it. So I talked to a career counselor who said, of course, you can work in a laboratory. And they didn't, no mention of MLS whatsoever. So I graduated with that, and that brings me to my first formative experience. What do you do with a biology degree? Well, I started working at the Nebraska Humane Society, working with cats as my patients. So I was helping to collect cat labs and cat specimens, prep them for surgery, keep track of their health. From there, I went on to phlebotomist. I decided that direct patient care was maybe less my thing. It's a little too emotionally charged. Phlebotomy was totally different, right? And so I remember being told, well, if you can draw a person, or if you can draw a cat, you can draw a person. And that got me into phlebotomy. And it's not true. Cats are far easier to draw. So I did this laboratory support position of phlebotomy and specimen processing for a few years. I got very good at it. I was in a leadership position, and I started working with these people known as medical laboratory scientists who urged me to go back to school. So my second formative experience was accepting their advice, and I went back to school to the UNMC MLS program. I put in 1 year and I got my, passed my boards and started working as a medical laboratory scientist. So coworkers became teachers, became coworkers again, and now I was in the core laboratory. And here's really where things started to change a bit. I started working more as a trainer. I loved chemistry, I loved analyzers, I loved training people to not be afraid of these big analyzer machines, right? They're just toddlers bolted to the floor. And I did that for a bit until I had my own child. I worked 7 on 7 off, and there's no daycare that does 7 on 7 off, at least where I live. So I had to make a decision. I could stay the course the way that I was, through building bridges and having a good reputation with people. I was offered a genetics lab position, never done genetics in my life. Or I could go on to clinical academia. A previous coworker of mine offered me a position I'd never heard of as an education coordinator. So I ended up taking it, which was my last big formative experience here. Onward to clinical academia, this big unknown, which brings me to my quote there on that career map. Forward is still forward, whichever way you are facing. Keep moving and only look back to enjoy the view. Regardless of which choice I made, the choice is always forward. Maybe if I'd made a choice and I didn't like it, at least I would have learned I didn't like it. Maybe I could have circled back, right? But I do love doing what I do. So how I work to build bridges within the community is, of course, that laboratory engagement piece that I mentioned. I like to work with, my current project is low fidelity or low-fi lab engagement, where I noticed at career fairs, we can't bring our analyzers in, we can't bring bacteria in. And so how do you reconceptualize what we do and show it to people? And so I put my love of art and engineering together and built prototypes, looked up YouTube tutorials on how to work with resin, how to recreate the laboratory in a safe biohazardous way. Is it one for one? No. But if people are interested in the concept, they will ask, how do I get into a laboratory? How do I learn more about this profession? I believe I build bridges with my students as well in being an active mentor. So, in my undergrad, I didn't have a whole lot of close relationships with my professors. I was very busy working. So I want to be there for my students and be the person that they can ask questions to. And I like to provide them as much information as I can. So every year, sort of giving them, how do you talk about benefits during your job interview? How do you make an interview work for you? Getting them comfortable, letting them be able to just ask me the question. Even if I don't know the answer, I can help look it up for them and we can do that together. I love this old quote of planting trees. It's about a good society is where the elderly can plant trees whose shade they will never see. Now, I'm not quite elderly, not there yet, but I do like the notion of working really hard towards something and you might not see the end goal yourself, right? My students go on to South Carolina, they go on to California, they go all over, and I don't necessarily get to see the effect that I have on them, but I still want to bring them 100% of me. And so wherever those seeds go to travel, whether they end up in the laboratory, whether they go into med school, always just sort of bringing that 100%. Let's plant these trees and let them grow beautifully, right? So the valuable skills, again, I mentioned that reconceptualizing for my recruitment. How do you break down things into simpler pieces? And that's a huge portion of my teaching and handling of students as well. Communication, I would do a lot of communication. I'm doing it right now, right? Lots of emails and keeping track of things and such, and continuously learning. I haven't mentioned it before, but I am in pursuit of my master's, which will hopefully allow me a faculty position someday, fingers crossed, as I work my way up my own career pathway. I'm in the UNMC Healthcare Professions Teaching and Technology program currently, which has been one of the greatest experiences in guiding my sort of lo-fi recruitment ideas or researching the current culture of students and getting to build that bridge with them because things change over time, right? And so that has been a wealth of knowledge for me. Within that program, I was able to watch Teaching Without Walls, which is a YouTube sort of short series by Michael Welsh, that really truly inspired me to put more of myself into my work. And yeah, I think that is the short of my pathway through the laboratory.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lauren. It looks like many of the people in our chat agree with you. It appears you are a wonderful mentor and teacher and helper. So thank you for sharing your story. Now I would like to introduce you to Dr. Maheshwari, who will describe her path. So Dr. Maheshwari, please introduce yourself and share your story with us. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm Manju Mukherjee. I'm the director of the Diagnostic Cytology program at University of Nebraska Medical Center. I'm happy to share my story with you all. All right, so as I said, I'm the director of the Diagnostic Cytology program. Our program is a master's level program. And my current responsibilities include administration, teaching, and research. So mostly administration, 65% of my FTE is administration. So in addition to directing the program, I'm also involved in various committees as a member and in a leadership role in our college level, university level. And I am also an active participant in our professional societies, ASC, ASCP. So I've been in committees as well. I do teach cytology course. So, we as a master's degree program incorporated all the new standards and guidelines for the master's degree program. So I concentrated more on that, such as digital pathology, anatomic pathology management, capstone courses, etc. And my teaching is my 30% FTE, and research is even a smaller portion, 5%. But even in that, I'm very interested in research. So I have done research projects utilizing digital pathology, eye tracking technology, and e-learning modules. So those are, I keep research in my day-to-day activities as well. Well, my story is I'm from India. So I did my bachelor's in physical therapy. There it is called as physiotherapy in India. So after finishing my physiotherapy, I was in a research project where I got interested in going deep into anatomy. So I went to a master's degree. I went to get my master's degree in anatomy there in India. And after that, I came to US in 2009, and I wanted to continue my study, but I did not know what to do. So I was looking through the websites, and on the University of Nebraska Medical Center website, I saw a program called cytotechnology, and then it was called a cytotechnology. And it was a 12-month certificate course. So I thought, okay, well, I can do it. So I joined the program, got certified as a postbaccalaureate certificate program. And then at that time, I was introduced to this great technology, virtual microscopy. So I got much interested into that. And then so I thought, well, I'll do my PhD in virtual microscopy. So I did my PhD and I joined the program as a faculty in 2012. And then, I was an education coordinator. And then in 2022, I became the director of the program. So in our program, I kind of have all the perspectives like student, faculty, and director. So it's a great journey, and I'm so happy where I am. I love cytology. And as the quote says, do what you love and success will follow. Yes, I do love so much being with the students, helping students, and training students for cytology programs and labs. So how do I build bridges with the laboratories? Well, our program is kind of unique in this. So we do have 16 clinical placement locations all over the United States. So what does that mean is all the students, all those locations are UNMC students. We provide the didactic portions online, and they get the clinical training at their location. So we do have 16 placement locations right now. We are keep building on it. There will be more locations very soon. I also, communicate with the labs for the clinical rotation piece. So we have 50 plus lab that are affiliated with our program so that we can send the students there. And we did have some international students coming to our program, get graduated from our program. I still do have contacts with them, how they are doing. And it's a great joy when I get emails and phone calls from the students, to know about our program. So I meet with them one-on-one to explain about our program and talk about cytology. I can talk about cytology anytime, any day. So that's a real joy. And our long-term goal is actually to have clinical placement locations in, other countries. So we have communicated with Rwanda, Qatar, and India. It's a long process. So it's a long-term goal. So one day, definitely we would like to have connections with the countries. The interest, definitely, I'm interested in innovative education. So as we are evolving in our education, adding more and more clinical placement location, we need to be innovative in training them. So again, as I said in my current responsibilities, I do incorporate virtual microscopy. Actually, that is one of my, that's my PhD dissertation. So we have 7,000 to 8,000 glass slides digitized that our students use 24/7. And also we do like e-learning modules. This is important because, some of the clinical placement locations are cytology lab, and they may not have grossing lab or flow in their particular institution. So we have created e-learning modules to substitute that. So we want to train the students all across consistently. So we use that. And, the eye tracking, just wanted to say a little bit. So as we all know, we screen the slides using my microscope. But it is oftentimes difficult to understand whether the students are lacking in locator skills or, interpretation skills. So I make them look at the digital images and I track their eye movement to see exactly what they are looking at so that, I can definitely, understand their locator skills and interpretation skills, and I can train them accordingly. So we occasionally use eye tracking technology as well. So our program is very innovative. So we use lots of technologies, just as I mentioned. And, I'm also interested in recruitment activities. As I mentioned earlier, I love talking to potential students, and UNMC have lots of recruitment activities. And one such thing is Backstage Pass. So, the high school students, we invite all the high school students and kind of let them kind of look at and talk to all the program faculties to know what the programs are there for them to use or to pursue when they are graduating from college. So I've been to several colleges to talk about cytology. We take the microscope, we do cheek swab so that they would understand what a cell be looked under the microscope, etc. So it's a lot of fun. It is so much fun to see the joy in the students' faces when they look at the cells under the microscope for the first time and introducing cytology. So it's really great. And the skills I use is definitely team player, because we are a team. It is not only our UNMC faculty in Omaha campus, we also have these clinical placement locations all across. So definitely you need to be a team player, understanding everybody's work situations and ethics. Creative, yes, I need to be creative because, again, since we are handling several students at several locations, if they are lacking in any standards, I need to be creative, making sure they are getting all those standards and guidelines that is mentioned in our program. At the same time, I need to be flexible too. So I learned to be flexible to, again, to provide safe and supportive education or learning environment the students should have. So again, I love what I do, and please ask me any questions related to cytology or my experience in becoming a cytologist and the director. I'm happy to answer. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Manju. That is such a cool thing about the eye tracking. I'll have to learn more about that. That sounds fascinating. Thank you again for sharing your story. Next up, we have Vanessa Johnson. I'm excited to have her here, and I know she'll have a great story to share with you guys. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Dr. Rhodey. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Vanessa Johnson, and I am the current program director, or as our university says, program coordinator for the Medical Laboratory Science program at Louisiana Tech University. We are located in North Central Louisiana. And we'll start with my career map and show you kind of how I got here. If you see, I started out, of course, with my BS in medical laboratory science, but when you look at my formative experiences in my laboratory career, the first thing it says numbers weren't my future. When I came to Louisiana Tech University, my initial major was accounting. So I planned to be a CPA, and that is what I had on my mind to do. But then I really quickly realized that I really didn't want to do that. I knew that numbers were not in my future. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I wasn't in love with it, and I couldn't see it as my forever career. So I started researching in the catalog, and I actually found medical laboratory science. At the time, it was called medical technology, and then I spoke with the academic advisor, Dr. Kenneth Griswold, and he kind of ushered me into this profession. And that kind of takes me to that first career quote: find what you love, make a career out of it, and you will never work a day in your life. That is something my grandmother always told us, is that find what you're passionate about and make that your career. And so I absolutely love what I do. And so I did, all of my education is from Louisiana Tech University. I did go back on the business side and get an MBA. And then I also got a master's in industrial and organizational psychology. And I'll kind of talk about that in a sec. And in my position, my current responsibilities as the program director for our program, we are a university-based MLS program. We are accredited by NACLS, but we also are affiliated with some hospital-based programs as well. And so I teach our MLS lecture courses and laboratory courses. And at our university, we're a little bit unique because we're actually housed in the Department of Biological Sciences. So we're in the one of another science department. So our courses are actually also taken by pre-med students and other biology students that want to get into research. So it kind of gives us a little bit of an extra exposure in our own department. And we're also in that department, we have nutrition and dietetics, and that will kind of go into some of the how I build bridges with the laboratory community or profession with overcoming silos, because we're more common than what we realize we are. So as nutrition dietetics, they look at a lot of laboratory results. I've had the opportunity to work with them. And so it kind of gets us out of just thinking about laboratory as an isolated part of the healthcare system, and we kind of start seeing ourselves more broader as we are. And but I also do a lot of recruitment. Of course, all of our programs, we need to do recruitment. We do recruitment just for the university, but then we also have started some very targeted initiatives with the Louisiana Workforce Commission and also some other workforce development companies where we're bringing in students as early as junior high school, because a lot of people are kind of like me. they didn't know about laboratory science until they were in college and we were in another major. A lot of our current majors found us that way. So we are starting to make some very targeted recruitment efforts in the junior high school levels. And we have some interactive things where we bring them to our campus and to other campuses along the I-20 corridor because we're in North Louisiana. And so other formative experiences, having to relearn the coagulation cascade. Most of my work experience has been in the area of special coagulation and hematology. And when I accepted a position, then I got a little scared because I thought, oh, wow, I have to teach coag and I have to do coag again and I have to do special coag. I should know this stuff. And it just made me realize that you're going to be a lifelong learner if you're in this profession, and you have to be. And we don't know it all. So, and it's okay that we don't know every answer to every question, but I knew that I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed the investigative side of it. And that kind of led me into an opportunity in 2008 to serve as an adjunct professor. And when serving as an adjunct professor for a blood bank class here at Louisiana Tech University, I knew I had found that thing that I loved that my grandmother always talked about. And this was it. I absolutely knew that. And so then I returned in 2012 to Louisiana Tech University as the program director. And building bridges, one of the things I also said is seeking opportunities to learn and from others and to teach others. So being in the laboratory, we don't often think of ourselves as educators, but even if you're working at the bench, you're always educating someone, whether it's about specimen integrity and or anything like that with tests that we do. We are all educators in some shape, form, or fashion. And so don't be afraid to look for those opportunities to teach others because we are the experts in our field. And don't be afraid to stand on the educational background that you have. And then looking at engagement beyond the testing, and that kind of goes back to seeking those opportunities. When I was at the VA and a supervisor at the VA, I would do training for nurses because they didn't know all the intricate things that go into why we do what we do in the clinical laboratory. And so I think it was important for us to actually share that information. And opportunities of interest for me. Professional networking has been huge for me. And that has started with being a member of ASCLS, American Society for Clinical Laboratory Science, and also serving as the president of our state society for 2 years. But it also allowed for me to meet some of the people that are actually on this call as panelists. I met them through those organizations. And also with the ASCLS Leadership Academy, I was in the inaugural class for that, and it was building leaders within our laboratory profession. And so I have made lifelong friends and colleagues through that. And I think that that is very important for us professionally, not just individually, but as the profession as a whole, because we can all learn from each other. And as an educator, being a NACLS volunteer for our accrediting agency has been huge in my professional journey because I had to start a program. Our program was not initially NACLS accredited at the university level. And so I had to write a self-study. I had to write a preliminary report. And being able to volunteer to actually review other programs, you learn so much from each other. And that's where that sharing kind of comes into play because none of us have it all right. And all of us have something that we can contribute to other people to help advance the profession, not just personally, but the profession as a whole. So I feel like my experience as a NACLS volunteer, from a site visitor to a paper reviewer to being on the review committee where we reviewed accreditation awards for other programs, was very instrumental in my path. And three most valuable skills, or whether they're technical and or soft skills. I think that the soft skills really comes into play when you get onto the educational side. I think a lot of us are very technically sound because of our education, but communication is key with anything. If you can't communicate, the patient, if you're in the hospital situation, can and will suffer for that. And then also your students, if you're in the educational system. So, and I think communication, just not verbal, oral communication. And I think in the world of text and social apps where people aren't used to communicating on a broad basis, I think we need to really concentrate on that. And then also multitasking and prioritization. I think that is one of the things that sometimes our students can struggle with is how do I prioritize when everything seems stat? And so learning how to just be able to do multiple things at one time and knowing when and where to put your time and energy is very important, not just in laboratory testing. I'm currently teaching that to my 18-year-old daughter who's a college student. I think in life, we need to know how to do a lot of things at once and also be able to know where to put our time and energy. And that kind of comes to that second quote that I have. And the third one, no is a complete sentence. I think a well-placed no is okay sometimes. It's okay for us to say no. I think people who are in the laboratory profession or in the healthcare profession, we tend to feel like we can't say no because of patients or because of our students, but sometimes you need to be able to say no, and that's okay, and understand that that's okay. And then failure is simply delayed success. What did you learn from the failure that you can change the next time? And so, even as an educator, when I do exams and students don't do well, okay, let's see what happened. Why did you miss this question? Is there something in the actual learning process? And also identifying students who are coming out of COVID where they had a lot of online instruction. Are we going to be able to see and find some gaps in their education that we can help kind of fill that? And the last skill I listed here is situational awareness. I think it is very important that you learn how to read the room, whether you're at the bench, you are in practice, you're a educator. I think we're dealing with so many people who have emotional stresses from work, from life, and unfortunately, a lot of those things kind of go not necessarily unnoticed, but they're not addressed. And so being able to read the room and know what's going on with other people around you, I think is very, very helpful. And looking back over my career, I'm just very glad that I've had the opportunities that I've had because it's all made me a better person. And I think that in looking at all that sum total is that even I've never feel like I've ever failed. I just feel like, okay, I just need to try a little harder next time. But thank you for listening to my journey.
Thank you, Vanessa. That resonates with me for sure. I love failure is simply a delayed success. I think that's going to be one I use myself going forward. I've often had to tell people what I've learned over my leadership growth is not no, but ask me later. Like I can't do it right now. Let's talk again in a year. I need to set aside some other obligations and things like that. So thank you so much for your
Thank
story.
you.
I am excited to introduce to you Mr. Jim Payne. He is one of my newest colleagues and people I've met through this profession. He is doing wonderful things with high school students and younger students, recruiting them into our field. So welcome, Jim. I look forward to hearing your story.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this wonderful audience. I come from a alternative background, not the typical what most people do in terms of the degree path. I'm teaching a high school program, but also my original degree was in marine biology from Stony Brook University. The reason I ended up going that route is I enjoyed science and biology most particular, and I was a scuba diver, so I thought, let's combine all that and do marine biology. But after I was done with that degree, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a PhD or something else. And my advisor told me, don't go straight to graduate school, work as a technician for a few years, and then go on wherever that route takes you. And so what I ended up doing is becoming a research technician at the University of Rochester because the pay would have been about similar on Long Island outside of New York City, but the cost of living would have been 3 times as much. And I just wanted to not only eat ramen noodles every day. And so I worked as a research technician in Dr. Federoff's lab. We were studying the blood of Alzheimer's patients. It's really cool research. I was often teaching the PhD candidates, postdocs, new students, new techs. And when he left to be the head of Georgetown Medical Center, Dr. Federoff left, that I realized, well, I don't want to be a PhD. I saw the PhD researchers they would have like their kids on the floor while they're writing a research grant or a research paper. And I didn't have kids yet, but I didn't think that was the type of father I wanted to be. So I asked my boss, what do I do now? And he said, well, you're really good at teaching. And like I said, the PhDs, postdocs, that sort of thing. Maybe you want to become, biology teacher. And so I ended up going to the University of Rochester and got my master's in science education, assuming I'd be a normal biology teacher. And that was the plan. And once I had worked for Dr. Grayhack, we were studying the bacteria that cause cavities, Streptococcus mutans, and doing gene deletions, my student teaching came up. And so I had to leave research permanently. And I bounced around after a couple of years trying, daily subbing, long-term subbing, and then this opportunity at WMOCO opened up. So that's where I currently teaching our now it's called medical lab assisting and phlebotomy. But when I started, it was called laboratory technology, and I was hired 2 weeks before school started. I didn't have a beaker or test tube. I didn't have curriculum or standards or anything to go off, no connections in the industry, but they hired me anyway. And most of my equipment came late, so it was back ordered or that sort of thing. I didn't have benches until November. And so I'm constantly trying to just survive, get to the next day. I create a bunch of labs. We're using Kool-Aid, or food coloring, or oils, a bunch of things to simulate what the actual tests that the kids or the skills that they're going to be learning. And I was able to get through that first year. And I realized that if we're going to really add phlebotomy, I need to get trained in phlebotomy. So I ended up going that summer and getting trained in phlebotomy so that I could then teach it to my students the following year. And I've taken that program that, like I said, was a small program, not many students, didn't really know what I was doing, to building a program that is slowly becoming renowned around the country as a way to address the workforce shortage in the medical laboratory. The way that we're able to do that is that, first of all, over time, I've built up a lot of equipment for our students. So like each one of my students now, 15 years later, has their own microscope. That's a research grade binocular microscope. We even now are just finishing up getting a microscope camera for each student that has a tablet connected that they can then take pictures or video of whatever they're seeing, so that then we can have them put that in their lab reports. They have access to spectrophotometers, incubators. They're doing their own gel electrophoresis. They're doing PCR. They're doing restriction digestion. They are using a gel documentation system, microrepeaters, the whole 9 yards. So they're really able to have all that equipment. And so what's that allowed us to do is really teach about 60 different laboratory skills. In their junior year, they'll learn how to use most of that equipment for the first 3 months. Then they will learn phlebotomy on some fake training arms. They will then, in the spring of their junior year, go out on a co-op where they're drawing blood of real patients for their actual medical samples for about 40 hours, so they can be able to sit for national certification in phlebotomy. And currently we use the AMT certification. They'll also learn some college level hematology, immunology, like high school level anatomy and physiology. Then when they come back for the second year, in their senior year of high school, they'll learn diagnostic microbiology, they'll learn clinical chemistry, they'll learn urinalysis. We even get into some college level genetics, like I said, doing restriction digestion, PCR, bacterial transformation, a little bit of bioinformatics. They will then be able to go out and work in the medical laboratories as a medical lab assistant. And that is another training, unpaid training co-op similar to phlebotomy. That gives them the required hours so they can actually sit for a medical lab assisting certification. So over the course of this 15 years, we have gone from medical laboratory leaders looking at this is something cool, but not something I'm going to invest in, to by March of 2020, the University of Rochester with Melissa Allen as their leader and Vicki Roberts as the education coordinator were able to figure out it so that I could actually set up the chance for our students to actually do those real blood draws. So their department, our legal department, made it happen. That led to us being able to actually get these kids certified. They get a chance to explore, is this a career I want to do? We even now have a bunch of shadows where they can look at individual medical lab careers and get an opportunity to test it out. So like a phlebotomist assistant shadow where they spend 3.5 hours in the gross room, seeing all sorts of organs coming down from surgery, getting a chance to do the or to get the sight, sounds, and smells of that laboratory, make sure that's something that they want to do. They'll spend about half an hour with one of the top pathologists in New York State while they're actually diagnosing disease on a multi-head teaching scope. And they'll spend about 2.5 hours as part of a post-autopsy conference after lunch. So really getting them immersed in that. And some of them have confirmed they want to be pathology assistants. Some of them, nope, that's not what I want to do. And so it's a really powerful experience either way. In terms of one of the things that I think is really important, and some people have already talked about it, is making sure that you're networking. That can be on things like LinkedIn. That's how I met Dr. Brody and several other people on this call, but also trying to be volunteering in your professional organizations. So I know I'm the now past chair for the membership committee of ASCLS, American Society of Clinical Laboratory Science. I'm also the state chairperson for membership. I serve on the workforce steering committee for ASCP, and I am the subcommittee chair on improving visibility to high school students. I also try to be an advocate in my community. I am actively reaching out to counselors, administrators, even having politicians come into my class and be lab techs for the day. So we put a lab coat on, put a little lab ID. My students teach them some medical laboratory skills, and it totally reframes their understanding of medicine in general and the type of education I do called career technical education. I'm also actively making sure that when I have opportunities to write in journals or magazines or get a chance to speak at conferences or be on podcasts, these are things that anyone can look to do to make it so that more people are knowing about laboratory medicine as a career path. When I think about what's necessary, what kind of skills do you need to follow a path kind of similar to mine, you're talking about work ethic. You need to be willing to work hard even when you're tired or that you don't think it's going to work. I mean, for 8 years, I was trying to get people excited about what we were doing with these high school students, and it wasn't working, and finally it did. So having that work ethic to keep working is important. Also having self-motivation to want to take on those difficult tasks and have it so that if you want to do great things, you've got to be willing to put in that work and be motivated to do so. And being a lifelong learner. All the time I'm talking to people about information that I wasn't formally trained on when it comes to college because I'm a marine biology major, but because of the pathway I've gone, I'm constantly learning more about laboratory medicine, constantly learning about medicine in general, what's going on in the human body, a section of the biological sciences that I actively tried to avoid when I was in college. And now I'm speaking here to a whole bunch of people that's their expertise. One of the things that I try to remind my students, because they'll get upset, oh, I failed, and oh, I'm not good enough. My quote that I try to always tell them is, you learn almost nothing from success. But if you're paying attention, you could learn everything from failure. And what I mean by that is, if I was successful in something, it may have been just dumb luck that I happened to be successful, not that I actually did something right. It just happened to be that way. But if you did fail, Then if you're paying attention to what happened and what could have gone right or what could have gone and what gone wrong, you can then take that opportunity to learn and truly be successful in what you're trying to do. To kind of finish things up, some opportunities of interest. CDC does have their public health fellowships, which is like a 1 to 2 year paid commitment, but if you have at least a bachelor's in biology, medical laboratory, there's a whole list of them if you click on the link there for you to help out in public health. I would highly suggest being part of ASCP's Career Ambassadors Program, reaching out to local high schools, community organizations, things of that nature, and help them understand what the medical lab careers are and how we are vital for medicine to work as it currently does. If we want to have it so people are safe and that you're able to get your lab test done in a timely manner, we need to have more medical lab personnel. And consider being a volunteer for ASCP, ASCLS, any of those professional organizations. It's a really helpful to learn more about the community and help yourself in terms of your career path. Additionally, I just found out about the commissioned officers for the Public Health Service. So if you're wanting to serve in a public health role, that can also be another option. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate your public health opportunities there. I've done a lot of those, and I often share those with my students as well. I always tell people public health and the medical laboratory are really hand in hand. They really go together. So thank you for all of your hard work. It has been wonderful getting to know you. I look forward to seeing you in New York in September. Last but certainly not least is one of my friends and colleagues I've known for years now, Dr. Patricia Tilley. She's the current ASCLS president, and I'm really excited to hear her career path. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Dr. Brody, and others on the call that I also have as great colleagues. So I am the current program director for the graduate programs at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm a full professor. I am also the vice chair of our Clinical Health and Information Sciences Department and will transition to the chair in January. One of the unique things about that position is I am 100% remote, so I do not live in Cincinnati, Ohio. So that's probably a unique experience compared to other individuals on this presentation today. So let me give you a little bit about background, and I'm going to bounce over my formative experience first and then over to my education. So you'll notice on my formative experience, it says law enforcement. So I was actually a female police officer before I went to college. I did almost a decade of work as a street officer as well as a undercover officer. So I did narcotics for a while. I learned a lot about people during that experience, and that's why it's listed as one of my formative experiences, because if you think about law enforcement, you don't really see people on their best days. And I think that really translate. I was recently at a meeting that translates into what we do as laboratory professionals. When you are dealing with patients and you're doing phlebotomy and those types of things, you have to remember that they're there because they're sick or they're having a bad day. So that experience really lent me well to this field, as well as working with students, because I have students all over the country. So so when I decided to go to college, I started out actually as a business major. So I did not start out in the sciences, because there was a law firm in my hometown here where I was a police officer that said, if you get your degree, we'll send you to law school, because there's not a lot of police officers that end up as attorneys. Well, when I was going to school, I was doing business law, business management, marketing, economics. I pretty much almost have a degree in business. And of course, I took a biology class. It was a liberal arts school. And I was the non-traditional student, sat in the front row, so I was the curve breaker. And I really enjoyed the class. And of course, the professor was, if you get better than a C in this class, you're a really good student. And at the end of the class, I really enjoyed it and walked up and said, I think I would like to change my major to biology. So I did. Really had no idea what I was going to do with that degree, and had 3 children at the time. One of our daughters ended up in the hospital with croup. And I was sitting in the room at the time studying for all things. It was botany, and I remember it well. And someone came in to draw our blood, and I can't tell you if it was a phlebotomist or actually a medical lab scientist. But they asked me what I was going to do with my degree, and I really didn't know at the time. And they said, well, we have this program in the hospital lab that maybe you'll be interested in. You should go down and talk to them. And I did, and I ended up in a hospital program. So I did I'm technically considered a 4+1. I did my biology degree, and then I did a NACLS accredited hospital-based program. When I my MLS certificate at Sanford Health, there were too many of us in my area. And in fact, I was the only one hired out of my class, and I was a float. So that means I would work 2 days on days, 2 days on nights, and I'd go back to evenings. And I don't care how old or young you are, that's very hard to do. And so I actually applied to be a research associate at the medical school. And the professor called me up one day and said, I don't think you want to be a research associate. I don't think you want to work for me. I think you want to get your PhD. And so I went to medical school. Is about 45 miles from where I live. I went down and I visited with the faculty there, and I did enter the program. My background is really microbial genetics, and I worked on vancomycin resistant enterococci as part of my PhD work. So you can see where my MLS work really lended well to what my PhD is in. And I'll be honest that that's probably one of the strong reasons why I got into that program, because they knew I understood about controls and how to ensure that what I was doing was accurate. So I didn't end up doing my PhD. My PhD technically says biomedical health science, because I also have a background in human genetics and proteins and enzymes and biochemistry. So very, very strong background, but clinically oriented. So I am, you see, I did start at a very small school while I was working on my PhD. So I was all but dissertation and started teaching at a university that's 7 miles from the medical school while I was finishing up my dissertation. And then each time I moved, the first school only had 900 students. The second institution was 1,200 students. When I moved to South Dakota State, that's about 20,000 students. And now I'm at the University of Cincinnati, and we have close to 50,000 students. So increase in responsibility and increase in exposure to many different individuals. My current responsibilities, I have developed the graduate program from the ground up. So I developed the master's program. Our master's is in medical lab leadership. And what I really like about that program is we have different laboratory professionals in that program. In other words, they're not all medical lab scientists. We have histology professionals, cytology professionals, specialty laboratory individuals. So people with biology degrees that have worked in specialty labs or in public health, like Dr. Rodi has indicated, that have micro backgrounds. So even though the degree says medical laboratory science leadership, we have laboratory professionals in all avenues. And that's what I really enjoy about that, because I can interact with those individuals. Again, as the vice department chair, I do faculty evaluations, work on budgets, do a lot of administrative things, but I still teach in the graduate program and really enjoy that. So in addition to our master's, we also just started a doctorate of clinical laboratory science. So our first cohort starts this fall. And so that's really exciting, because the University of Cincinnati has a bridge program. So MLT to MLS, a traditional MLS program, our master's, and now our doctoral program. So we have a career ladder educational program, which is really nice to have. So other than my law enforcement experience, I did have the opportunity to do a postdoc in between while I was teaching. And I was working PRN in a micro lab at the same time because that's relaxing to me. Teaching can be very hectic, and you do have to have a lot of flexibility, like you've heard some of the other educators say. But I was able to work in a micro lab PRN as well as do a postdoc. The postdoc was in cardiovascular physiology, and I worked with rats. And so I had to learn how to draw blood out of the tails of rats, and did hemodynamics on rats and other things. And I found out that I would much rather prefer to work with microorganisms than live animals. But that was a really good experience for me, working with, you know, the rules and regulations of IACUC, which governs the use of animals in research. And I had the opportunity as well to design a brand new molecular lab, because when I finished my doctoral work in the 90s, molecular diagnostics hadn't really hit the clinical environment. And so one of our major health systems wanted to start a molecular lab, and they asked me to come in and do that. So I worked with that hospital and set up all their first PCR tests and their workflow, and went through their first CAP inspection with them to get them kind of off the ground. So we've come a long way in molecular, but that was a real great experience. And I still, you know, feel that that was one of the strong points in my career. How I build bridges? Well, I still do. I go all the way to grade schools, to middle schools, to high schools. Even in my role now, I've been known to pour over 300 blood plates with red Jello and take them into a grade school and let them streak frosting and put sprinkles on like at the plate, and then bring in a microscope and show them what organisms really are. And I'm also part of the International Federation of Biomedical Lab Science. Dr. Rohde served on the International Advisory Committee with me on microbiology, and we've written statements for the World Health Organization. We've done things related to antibiotic, microbial resistance, and susceptibility, as well as when COVID hit, on the status of PCR testing when it first came out. So we collaborate with international colleagues and provide that technical detail across the globe. I am also the current ASCLS president, as Rodney mentioned, and I will honestly say I never had that on my list. I started out as a student rep in ASCLS, and over the years kind of worked my way up. And a couple of years ago, the nominations committee came and asked me to serve in this role. And it has been a really great experience, because I'm remote, I do have the flexibility of being able to travel a lot as long as I have internet and a computer. I'm not tied to a classroom in a lab. And the university is very supportive of those activities. So I get to interact with professionals, not only internationally, but also around the United States. And in our program, we have students in probably 40 states and 3 different countries. And I will be honest, they're from 22 years old to our oldest student is 58. So you're never too old to go back to school, and the experience that those individuals have is amazing. Some of the other things is industry partners. I serve on advisory boards in some industry groups. I also have had opportunities to consult with not only other educational programs and rewriting their curriculums. I very recently visited with Penn State and Penn Medicine and rewrote their hospital-based program for them and redesigned it so that they could improve their admissions and put out more professionals, because their workforce shortage is very real. I've also consulted with attorneys on malpractice lawsuits related to laboratory tests, and support the process of the laboratory. So when there's a question about if the lab did what they were supposed to do, I've had the opportunity to say, here's the process, here's the standards, and to serve as a professional witness. And part of that comes from because I did serve as a professional witness when I was in law enforcement. And I network, I can't, I know several people have mentioned networking. I can't say that that's probably the biggest value of this. If you recognize my name, I am the current editor, author of Bailey's and Scott's Diagnostic Microbiology. I'm on the 4th time I've done that textbook, and Dr. Rohde actually has been a contributor, as well as some of my master's students and other professionals. I did not start that book. Someone at an ASCLS meeting, George Fritzma, actually walked up and asked me if I knew anybody that wanted to write a micro book. And I said, well, maybe I would. And he goes, oh, that's right. You're a molecular microbiologist. So that's how that started. And I've had that book now for almost 16 years. I have 2 other books that I'm working on now where the author's retired that you will see come out in the next couple of years. So those experiences of being able to work remote with the university, as well as be an author of a major textbook and work with IFBLS, has all been built from networking with colleagues in professional organization. And like Jim mentioned, I think that is really, really key to not only meeting other people, but having the ability to talk to others and grow your career. I do feel like I've been told I'm an internal optimist. I try to be very authentic and transparent. As the ASCLS president, I tell everybody that I don't feel like anything I know, you can't know. Sometimes you just got to ask, because it keeps me really busy. Communication, like several others have mentioned, is really key. I do write not only in the textbooks, but in journals, as some of the other educators have said, and I speak. And in fact, I'm in the middle of a 7-state tour. I've just finished 5 visits to different state societies and with a speaker for them, and talked about the future of laboratory. I have had the opportunity to also speak with Greg Sossama, the president of ASCP, and Don Karcher, the president of CAP. So again, you get a network and go out and really meet the people where they are. And I think that is huge. My quote is everyone teaches and everyone learns. It doesn't matter where you're at in your career, you're always learning and you're always teaching others about what you do and who we are. And I also get the question of, how are you a leader? And if wherever you're at, doesn't matter if you were a bench individual and you're working, you're always a leader working with your peers and with other people. So I think together, everyone is a leader in their different roles. And I think you can see from the different career paths of everyone we have on here, we all have unique backgrounds, but we all have the commonality of working to promote lab science, which we're all obviously very passionate about. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Tilley. I feel like we have kind of a parallel career path, except for law enforcement, But I used to inoculate mice for rabies infections and arbovirus infections. So that's kind of a common thing. I love working with Dr. Tilley. So I will just kind of wrap up as we get to the question session, just to reiterate, for laboratory visibility and awareness, you all have an important role. You can be that expert. You can write. You can speak. You can visit classrooms. You can be a mentor. And you really never know the impact you're having. That's the challenge. You really don't. But at some point, if you're very fortunate and very blessed, someone will remind you of the impact you had in their lives. So just keep after it. And I really appreciate all of your stories. I thought we would start off we had a question in the Q&A for Lauren, but I'm going to kind of direct this to all of you. Maybe Lauren can start. And it has to do with student culture and kind of how lab educators, and really anyone, because you might be educating in the clinic site and things like that, how you kind of work across lab visibility across generations and kind of that whole culture of student. Any thoughts on that, Lauren, as you kind of think about your past, and feel free for the others to chime in.
Sure. So I think at least a small portion of it is being in sort of my master's program. Part of it was doing research. And so like actually seeing the papers of, what incoming, these papers about like how high schoolers are feeling about careers, how are they feeling about science? They're not necessarily laboratory direct. Some of them can be, but just sort of just like going through that information. But the biggest piece, I think, is just sort of when I'm speaking to high school students, I try to really meet them on their level. Like I'm not their teacher. I'm here at a career fair and I'm here kind of for them. So just sort of, asking them, what are they thinking? What kind of career fields are they like looking into? And I feel like I've discovered that the shift of choosing what career field you're in is gradually getting younger and younger. Like there's more pressure now than
Yes.
when I was in high school to have, it's like they want to make the decision before going into college at all. And there's a lot more opportunities to get like a CNA certification than there ever was, so that they have the option of entering the workforce like right out of high school, and letting them prolong that. So just, I think it's just making that connection, making that communication. There's maybe a bit of a portion of kind of being online, knowing where the kids want to be or watching the TikToks, which I do teach like high school students as well. So sometimes they show me these things. And, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not a young college student, so I can't say that I'm always with it. But when you talk to them at their level, they share that level back to you, I think. And that's sort of been my experience. Just getting to hear everything from their point of view.
Yeah, I know it. I know in Texas, and all of you can comment on this. One of the things we've been challenged with in our program and at the university level is so many students now are dual credit earners. And so they're coming into our program like it's 17, 18 years old. So it's an interesting mix of a 17-year-old and a 48-year-old, as Dr. Tilley mentioned, because we've had that. Any continuing thoughts on that kind of student culture within your experiences?
Dr. Rhodey, this is Vanessa. So I think what Lauren said is very true. You have to meet someone where they are. And that's why I think situational awareness and kind of knowing who's in the room and reading the room and realizing that we are more alike than we are different. We may learn different, we may think different, but we have a lot more commonalities. And I think when people find that common thread, it's a lot easier for even the older non-traditional, well, I'm not going to say older, a non-traditional student versus someone that's just coming in. And we are also seeing that those dual enrollment hours. I mean, my oldest daughter came into college with 48 credit hours. So after her first quarter, she was a junior as a freshman. And so I think we also have to be mindful, and again, that situational awareness of maturity level of students,
Right,
and
right.
they're having to grow up very fast in curriculums that aren't always very conducive to that. And so we have to learn to meet them where they are.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's interesting. I often joke with the students, like, why would you ever want to go work for a living right away? Enjoy 4 years of college. Jim, do you have any comments from your perspective of actually working with high school students so much?
So I think that high school students, because the nature of field, it can be easy to talk above them and explain things in technical terms. So I try as best I can to bring it down to something that's at their level, something that they can understand, and then build them up to using those words or those concepts. It's one of the reasons I teach so much medical terminology, because they walk into their college programs, coming to Dr. Rhodey's class, and they've learned 1,000 prefix roots and suffix of medical terminology. So they may not have heard of thrombocytopenia, but they can go, penia is deficiency, thrombo is clot, cyto is cell. Okay, I'm good. Versus when I learned it, all that stuff, I didn't know the medical terminology piece, so I would have to memorize each individual word. So giving some of them those tools, um, trying to be relatable, let them teach you about how they have found things online, whether it be through Instagram or TikTok. Be open to learning new ways of doing things. Uh, Even what I try to give my students options when how they do a project. It could be, you could do your traditional paper, or you could do a presentation, or you could do a poster, or you could do a TikTok, or like we figure out different ways for them to be able to demonstrate their knowledge. And I think that helps a lot. Also, making sure that they have the opportunity to explore careers, I think is really important, and we don't do enough of it. So I would love to see, every high school student have been in a medical laboratory, before they graduate. ideally well before they graduate, but I can't always have everything perfect. So they can see, oh, that was really cool. I want to learn more, and trying to have more shadow opportunities. I think labs have don't make it easy to help more students become in love with the medical laboratory, with certain rules or regulations they have. Some of them kind of arbitrary. I've heard that some labs are like, well, if they're not 18, they can't come in at all. And when you ask why, it's, well, that's just our policy.
Yeah.
Opening up those policies can be huge to having it so that we don't need, what is it, like 26,000 new graduates a year, and only graduate, I think it's now like 7,600. That gap alone could be at least partially addressed just by getting more kids to see the medical laboratory and possibly careers that they might be interested in.
Yeah, for sure. Other thoughts? One of the things that's fascinating to me as I get into my mid to late 50s is I feel that too at Lawrence. And I'm definitely not with it. And when I had kids in college, my own children, I felt a little better. My daughter would help me. And hey, Dad, you need to get on it. You get on this channel, you need to check this out. But what I have found as I've aged and become a seasoned veteran, as I like to say, is it does help to just share with young people or mid-20s people or whatever range you're in, because there are some commonalities and there's some fun. You can kind of poke at yourself. I always talk about I got a typewriter when I graduated high school, right? That was my graduation present. But I was on the side, I was very fortunate and blessed to be born in a way that allowed me to experience pre-internet, internet, social media, AI. I mean, we're seeing a ton of stuff in a span of about 40 or 50 years. So it's kind of an interesting conversation. Other thoughts from any of you?
I agree with all the panelists, about this topic, and just wanted to add that, it is also important to make the students feel they are listened. Our program have the students in, all range, just graduated from the college or working moms, dads, so with the family, so all sorts of students we have. So it is kind of important to create a culture of, safe and supportive environment in the classroom. And also I say that, we are all learning from each other. So, don't just think that I'm teaching you all, I am also learning from you. So that kind of creates a little bit of a supportive environment, I believe. So that's my thought.
Dr. Tilley, did you have a thought?
I was just going to add that I think what's really evident too is the structure of all the educational programs, which is one of the values of NACLS, is we have the ability to structure programs based on the needs of our regions. And along with that is when you look at the opportunities that ASCP offers, is you've got the different ways to enter into the field. So you can be a specialist in one area, and then you can work your way to add more specialties. So you don't have to like go jump in feet first and do a generalist. So I think the flexibility of our field based on the way our educational programs are set up and our different levels of certification, what I like about it is it's not one size fits all. So we literally can cater to the different populations of individuals we have out there that are interested in our field. And I think that's a huge avenue that we have that a lot of other fields don't necessarily have.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. I've got a couple of other questions real quick. I usually don't do this, but from the chat, someone just mentioned, I wish connecting with others within the medical lab community was easier than it actually is. You guys have been blessed with connections. I think we would all share with that individual, join us, right? I mean, join a professional organization. I know if you're working in the clinical side, it's very difficult, but just one act of joining something, you don't have to be president, you don't have to lead a committee, just get in there. And this is going to lead a little bit into the next question around a social media presence and its major impact on career decisions for newer generations. Can you guys kind of talk about maybe how you helped establish more of a social media presence, whether you are super pro or super con? I'm probably in the middle on some of this. I love to use it. Sometimes it drives me crazy because, as we know, it can be a tool for misinformation as well. I spend many, many hours battling that personally. It's one of my passions is accurate science communication, but can some of you talk about that? Maybe Jim, talk about that. We'll start with you. We met on LinkedIn, but can you talk a little bit about that in your life, and then we can share that across the scheme?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Rody, I don't know how you have any time to teach, to have a life with your family and your wife, with how much times I come online and see something either on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever of the posts that you're making. You're very prolific. I'm not nearly to that level of putting out content, but it's something that was a game changer for me. So I had my program, I started in 2012. By November of 2020, I had kind of started to realize, well, my dad's always talked about you should do LinkedIn, you should do LinkedIn. And I was like, okay, Dad, that's cute, but I'm not gonna spend the time on it. And we had a lot of time with the lockdowns to have it so you could think about things. And so right around November of 2020, I decided to start reaching out to the laboratory medical world, and actually reached out to Dr. Milder, who was the ASCP's chief medical officer, along with two other hosts that were part of ASCP's um, Inside the Lab podcast, and just kind of said, hey, I've loved X, Y, and Z about the recent podcasts. I have kind of a unique background, explained what I was doing, and said, if you're ever interested, I'd love to, possibly be on the podcast. And they ended up a couple months later contacting me about it. But I tried to make sure that I was on LinkedIn, couple, maybe 15 to, 30 minutes a day, actively reaching out to people in the industry, and, trying to build more of a presence. And that led to more podcasts, more opportunities. I was asked to be on like the membership committee for ASCLS. I was asked to be on the workforce steering committee for ASCP. These are not things that I was actively seeking out outside of I'd like to do more to help people. And it was through that social media aspect. And now I have, several thousand people I'm connected to on LinkedIn, which has both helped me in the help having more people interested in what we're doing with the high school medical laboratory piece, but I've also been able to help people get jobs and help people students get into colleges. So I've had one student that's currently going to Kaiser University in Florida, and she's going for their histotech program. I was able to help her get into that. Or I had another graduate that her husband was moving to San Antonio because of his job, and she wanted to know, could I help her at all get a job in San Antonio? And by the time she got there, she had 4 job offers to pick from before she even landed in San Antonio. So you never know what those connections may mean. And it might be something that 5 or 10 years down the road, some connection you happen to make on LinkedIn or on Facebook in a professional setting that leads to some incredible things for you and for our community. So I would highly recommend being more active. Anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free. I'm under, I think it's James Payne, AHI is what's currently under on LinkedIn. Like I said, feel free to connect with me. But no, it can be an extremely powerful tool, especially if you're using it in a professional setting.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I mean, I think, and to answer your kind of quick question earlier on, there is a limit. You have the job to do, you have things to do. And I do try to stay active. What I've learned is how to schedule posts, how to be more efficient. And so, like I've already thought ahead to medical lab week, I probably want to be active. It's already scheduled for every day next week. So you just have to kind of learn these little tricks. That's another part of it. And I would welcome all of you to think about LinkedIn if you're not on it. It is a professional networking platform. It's very useful for networking. I would think it's the least politically motivated. You every once in a while you'll see a little thing pop in there, a little misinformation pop in there, but way more professional than many of the others. Not that the others are bad, but they are challenging at times. So I actually now in our introductory course in MLS, we have our students become members And it's a way for us to keep control and understand our alumni base, right? So if you can get them linked into LinkedIn, then it is a great way to kind of handle that. Kind of running out of time, so I'm going to jump topics a little bit for you guys to think about. It's been a kind of a consistent thing popping up in the chat. What about how do you feel about AI and its intersection with the medical lab science field? I think it's got a place. It's certainly got to be used professionally and ethically, but what are some of your thoughts around AI and the medical laboratory? What about you, Vanessa? Let's start with you.
I actually just had this conversation with some students a couple weeks ago, and I think it, as you said, it does have a place. I think it needs to be structured in a way, and this is how my students have said they use it. They use things like ChatGPT to help them with study guides and things like that, but then they're also having to cross-reference with their textbooks to make sure that the information they're getting is
Right.
actually correct. So I am kind of proud of them for knowing that there is some misinformation out there. And I know we've had issues before with students who used before AI really became very more widespread, that would use Google and things like that in searches, and they would, and I would always tell them, look, if you can't find it in your textbook to cross-reference it, come and ask me that question. So I think there are some positive ways that it can help students, particularly students who have so many different learning styles, to see it put in information put in many different ways. I think that's helpful. But we're also seeing the flip side of that, where people are using it and essentially having AI write papers for them and things like that. So it's a double-edged sword. And I think we just have to be careful in using it and how it's used and implemented in our classrooms. Our university is starting to help give us a little bit of guidance with policies in our syllabi and things like that. So it can be challenging, especially I teach an online class. So sometimes it can be challenging with some of those online platforms as well.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. That's the piece that part of me is wanting to have people understand it is here. It's not going away. So
Yeah.
what we try to focus on is ethics, how to use it correctly. We use it. I mean, I use it. I use it for
Yeah.
meeting minutes. I use it for writing job description. I use it a lot of things, but I always tell students you really need to use it as a reference tool, as a way to kind of check things. Other thoughts? Dr. Tilley, you were in law enforcement. How would you judge AI?
I'm gonna reiterate what Vanessa said, but I was actually looking at it a little broader too, because in fact, recently published a paper with one of my graduate students, and I think in the laboratory, AI has been there. I don't. That's part of it. Like, it's kind of the catchword of the year. But when you tell television that it called the cell wrong, and you tell it to call it something else, that's machine learning.
Yep.
So AI has been there. We've just never really thought about it that way. And I think the biggest thing is when you start looking into where our field is going and the technologies that out there and the public databases and what people are putting in there, it kind of goes along with what Vanessa's saying with the accuracy of information. But when you're trying to build algorithms that are highly complex for lab diagnostics and personalized medicine, we don't have the regulation out there yet. It's coming, and there are some laws in place, but I think that's the big thing is as we progress and build our knowledge and can use it in the laboratory, just like anything else, we have to have ways to check the accuracy. And I think that's probably the challenge, is what do you use and how do you know it's accurate, not only from the educational standpoint, but even in the lab. And we don't share well across lab information systems, right? So if you build an algorithm within your population, your data doesn't necessarily fit somebody else's. And so we need the public databases to improve what we're doing, but that's a rough road to go down yet, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Really big topic, right? And kind of a hard one to end on, but we do need to end. We've run out of time, but these are why you come back to these webinars, is because these topics cross all sorts of disciplines, all sorts of expertise. I want to wrap up today's session by reminding everyone that our next webinar will be on May 14th. So maybe drop that on your calendar. That session will feature 4 esteemed panelists that will be sharing their experiences as public health laboratory professionals. I'm looking forward to that one. Want to also remind you that ASCP's Ring Scholarship is now open for laboratory science students from medically underserved and/or rural areas. We encourage you all to help us spread the word to interested and eligible students about that important scholarship opportunity. Our team will add the link to the scholarship website into the chat for you. Finally, we'll be offering a 1.5 CMLE credit for this webinar. Instructions will be emailed to attendees tomorrow via Zoom. Credit can only be claimed by live attendees within 1 month of the webinar date, and today's date is April 16th. With that, I and my ASCP colleagues and my ASCLS colleagues and all the wonderful laboratory professionals that are out there and on this webinar, I'd like to thank you all for attending to come to today's webinar. I encourage you to visit our site where you'll find more info on all of these opportunities to support cdc1lab.org. And a quick reminder that next week is the 50th anniversary of Medical Laboratory Professionals Week. I hope you will all join us in raising that laboratory visibility by interacting with others both in your workplace and in your community. So have a great day, everybody, and a great week, and we'll see you soon.